Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to start in a few minutes. Just going to wait for more people to join us. I'll keep track of the numbers, and as they start to kind of taper off, we will start. But excited that you've joined us. If you want to share who you are and where you're from in the chat, we'd love to see where everybody's from. Um, and yeah, we'll get started in a few minutes. So thanks for spending your lunchtime with us today. Our numbers are keep up, so I'm just going to give it another minute or so. Looks like we got quite a range of people again today. It's good to see everyone. I'm gonna wait one more minute before we get started. Our hour's gonna go by quick today, um, but just want to give people a little bit of time to jump on. Before we get started, just want to let everybody know that this is being recorded. So you will get a link to the recording. It will also be on our new YouTube page, which I will be sure to include in the follow-up email as well. If you were able to join us last week on our Lunch and Learn, that video is up on our YouTube page as well. So be sure to check that out and share widely. Before I start sharing my slide, just want to welcome everyone. This is week 2 of National Parent Leadership Month. And each week we are featuring a different webinar that supports parents and parent leaders across our programs in Illinois. Our next 2 sessions, I'm so excited. We will be having our friends from Raising Illinois talking about how to involve parent leaders in your programming, and then the last week, how to get involved in advocacy for programs that support parent leaders. So I'm very excited for those two series. So please be sure, I'll be sure to send you the registration links if you haven't gotten them already. But really excited for today. So I am going to go ahead and start just to be mindful of our time. You all can feel free to utilize the chat. I will leave time at the end for some questions and try to go back through them. And if I have a little bit of break in between some slides, I'll try to check into the chat. But feel free to share experiences, thoughts. Love to hear what others are doing. Today's webinar is on protective factors and building protective factors. Which is a great way to not only promote parent leaders, but just provide support in general. In 2024, the model was actually updated, so we'll be sharing some of those updates, which is really exciting, and then some practical tools that you guys can use when you're working with parents and families in your programs. So feel free to keep the chat going. Again, this is being recorded. You'll get a link to the recording. You'll get a copy of the slides, and I will leave some time at the end for some Q&A. So I am going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. All right, hope everybody, oops. Everybody can see that. We're good to go. So again, today's session, protective factors, keeping families strong. We at PCA Illinois really feel like this is such an important topic because it really touches families where they're at and finding their strengths and involving them in the work that you guys are doing. So we're excited to present this. Just an overview of what protective factors, what the approach is. It is an approach that looks at the existing strength of families and builds upon these strengths to keep families healthy and children safe. We have a nice graphic here from our friends at Prevent Child Abuse North Dakota. It really is like an umbrella of support. And if we use the protective factors framework in the work that we're already doing, this is not something new. You have to go out and, find resources and funding to implement. It's just really strengthening the prevention work that you are already doing. Like I said, there's been some updates to the framework. In February 24, it was overarching update, including some revisions of definitions, really emphasizing cultural influences, which I think is, like thinking back to like doing this training before they had those updates. It's like, yeah, that wasn't really a big piece of the information. And then addressing new challenges for youth and families, but really just the expansion of well-being, culture, and cultural connectedness within the protective factors frameworks. So you can see where the updates included. I also linked the updates. So when you guys get the slides, if you really want to like go through it more in depth, you'll be able to do that as well. So the culture piece of the updates was huge in that it touched every piece of the framework. Like they didn't just like think of some strategies that like maybe took in some cultural considerations, but really the framework itself, emphasizing cultural influences to ensure that the framework is inclusive and respectful of the diverse backgrounds of the families we serve. And they kind of like framed it as the overarching protective factor. So we can't really look at building concrete supports without having the lens of the influences of the culture of the family that you're working with. And again, I think that this graphic just does such a great job of like kind of showing like why prioritizing culture is important. All right. So we're just going to jump right in. We don't have a lot of time. So we are going to go through the six protective factors. The first one being parental resilience. The original definition, excuse me, the ability to recover from difficult life experiences and often to be strengthened by and even transformed by those experiences. So a pretty like standard definition of like what we think of when we think of resilience. It's a lot of like overcoming challenges, bouncing back. But the updated language is managing stress and functioning well, facilitated by individual, relational, community, or societal factors when faced with stressors, adversity, or trauma. So I think like understanding that stress that parents feel, regardless of what type of parent you are, can come from a lot of different places. And instead of just assuming the stress is like internal or just family related, I think this updated language does a really great job allowing some space for some like other influences of stress to be able to make sure that when we are, trying to build parental resilience or embedding that into the work that we're doing, we're taking those factors into account. So, how do you build resilience in parents? This is not an exhaustive list. Obviously, there's only like 5 bullet points. But some ways that you can do that, again, thinking in the terms of not adding anything new to your guys' work plates or models that you're using, but just ways that you can more intentionally promote and build resilience in parents in whatever capacity you're working with them right now. So demonstrating in multiple ways that parents are valued, honoring each family's race, language, culture, history, and approach to parenting, encourage parents to manage stress effectively, supporting parents as decision makers and help build decision making and leadership skills, and helping parents understand how to buffer their child during stressful times. So if any of you were on our series 1 last week, you'll see a lot of like overlapping here. But really thinking about, especially like the bullet point number 3, encouraging parents to manage stress effectively. My background is in child welfare, and it wasn't really ever like super on the forefront of my thinking when working with families of how stressful just being involved in the child welfare system is. Like obviously, it requires a lot. to reunify family. But that never really influenced like how I communicated or how I talked to parents about the services that they were doing. It was, pretty cookie cutter and checklist. Reflecting back, like not necessarily best practice of way to do that, but like thinking about talking to parents about like what stresses them out and how do they handle it, and not telling them the way that they're handling it is bad or not the right way to do it, but really taking into account like what strengths do they already have to be able to build on that. And then also, I think the last bullet point of helping parents understand how to buffer their own child under stressful times. So recognizing that, um, you know, the home environment could be stress, and like how can that, flow over into the child, and like how parents giving them strategies of how they can support their children during stressful times. I'm going to stop. I see the chat coming in. Oh, people are already sharing resources. Love that. Like, please use the chat. I will save it and share out resources. So please do that. Um, and then if you have questions for the end, you can throw them in the Q&A as well. I won't check that all the time, but towards the end I will. So thank you for using the chat for good resources. I love that. The next protective factor, social connections. The original definition was the ability and opportunity to develop positive relationships that lessen stress and isolation and help to build a supportive network. The updated language, again, with that like cultural influence, healthy, meaningful, trusting, and sustained relationships with people, institutions, communities, or higher power that promote a sense of connectedness, belonging, and mattering. To me, I feel like this is one of the more intricate updates, right? When we think about social connections, because in the original language, it was really just like focus on positive relationships, and like with the focus on those relationships, like lessening stress and isolation, which of course we want to do. But with the updated language, like really thinking about like what do healthy relationships look like? What do trusting relationships look like? And not just with like individuals, but with your entire community, with institutions and systems, because that's a huge piece of it. We could have all the parent support groups in the world, and they could be successful, and our parents could find connections and create healthy relationships there. But if the system that brought them to that parent group, they don't trust that, it's going to be really hard to like foster those connections like on a deeper level, right? To see like that sustainable change that most of our programs are looking for. So how do we help build social connections and develop those social connections? I'm talking about relationships with extended family, friends, coworkers, and others, connecting parents with children of similar ages, mutual support networks for childcare, emotional support, fun, and concrete help. Looking at isolated families, working families, families living in dangerous communities, may have fewer positive social connections. So understanding that's not like the fault of the family necessarily. We would never fault a family whose parents work third shift, right? Because they can't go to the parent group that's during the day, right? That's not like an internal failure of the family, but like really looking at those as strengths and then trying to figure out like where we can build those connections. The next one, knowledge of parenting and child development. In my experience, I feel like this is one of the most critical ones, and frankly, one of the easiest ones that we can build. It's done through a lot of education. So the original definition was the ability to exercise effective parenting strategies to guide and know what to expect as children develop in multiple domains. So their physical growth, cognitive, language, and social and emotional. I think the updated language is extremely powerful, learning about prenatal, infant, and child development and using developmentally and contextually appropriate parenting practices. So again, you can kind of see like the cultural shift between those definitions, but really thinking like expanding our definition of like child development to look at prenatal. I know I saw a lot of like home visitor friends in the chat. That prenatal work we know is so important, right? Then we have like infant and then our child development, and then really thinking about like contextually appropriate parenting practices, not like what we think should be the parenting standards or practices, not what worked best for our kids. So that's probably what's going to work best for your children. But really thinking about like with that cultural lens, like what are the appropriate parenting practices? And there's going to be some, obviously, the biggest one that I can think of it as example is potty training, right? Like we know kids develop on their own little spectrum, and some kids can be potty trained at an earlier age. Some kids need a little more time. But I think like where we can like all come together and say like a child shouldn't be punished because they need a little bit more time for potty training and they've passed the age of 2, or a child was already potty trained and like has started regressing, right? So helping parents understand that like developmentally, it might take a little longer. You might see some regression with some of these traits. But just the prevention piece of that is empowering parents to understand development to where, it doesn't turn into abuse or neglect because a child is either not progressing developmentally or regressing. Because we know that children with developmental delays often are at higher risk of abuse and neglect. So this one is a huge one. So what can we do to help these families? Just basic information about how children develop. I got into child welfare when my daughter was like 7 months old. And I kid you not, like I learned the most from the ASQs, right? Like each little age group had different things that they were looking for. And that just knowing like what is developmentally appropriate and where if a child is not meeting one of these, like not necessarily that means they're being abused or neglected, but just like something to pay attention to and to work on. Helping parents understand the ways children develop. So I think, one of the most common ones, we know that the more you read to infants, to children, the benefits that comes with that, that's a pretty common knowledge, but like not everything is common knowledge. Some parents don't know when it's appropriate to start like introducing solid foods, because when they were little, maybe their parents like just they were 3 months old or the first time that they cut a tooth, or there's so many different things. So just like really talking to parents about ways to help children develop, dealing with developmental challenges. That's a stressful time in a family's life, right? It's stressful. I have worked with families who have children diagnosed with autism. I have had worked with parents whose, foster parents who are now caring for a child who was shaken. So now she has some developmental delays. So like really giving parents the tools to kind of like have those stressors, but then like work through them. Talking about alternative parenting practices, so not blaming parents for the way that they're parenting. That's a huge like one of those like bias things that we could spend all day talking about. Understanding ways to help children with special needs who are victims of abuse or neglect. I just mentioned that, and then parenting as a cultural act. There's no handbook for parenting. Nobody has a child at any age and just magically like knows everything about parenting. We typically parent how we were parented ourselves, and whether that was like safe and nurturing or not, we can support parents and help them like with a cultural lens, without shaming them or blaming them for how they're parenting, and really just educate them, and reinforce. I in my whole 9 years of child welfare, I never once did a parent ever like just come out and be like, yes, I specifically had children for the sole purpose of I wanted to abuse or neglect them. 99% of the time, like they just didn't know anything different. And once you have like that lens, it does shift the way that you think about like what you are seeing like in terms of like their parenting style. Ways to strengthen parenting, right? So like with the parents, modeling developmentally appropriate interactions with children. So if you're working with the family as a unit, really being intentional with like how you are communicating verbally and non-verbally with the child, providing constant information and resources on parenting and child development. We can never overeducate, whether they take our flyers and throw them in the trash or they put them on their fridges or screenshot them and put them in their phones. The more resources we can provide, the better. Encouraging exploration of parenting issues or concerns. Literally just telling parents, hey, this is not the first time I've heard of this issue, or like worked with a family who's had these stressors. Here is what they experience, and here's what like really worked for them. Like maybe we can try that. Because once you make it something that is not like internally like a deficiency on their own, where they can believe that like other people are struggling with that too, it does like build some trust and like sense of community just by doing that. Providing opportunities to trap new parenting strategies. Love this one. I think back to like when I would supervise parent-child visits. Like, why would I just sit there and just like take notes and like think about like things that these families could be doing together and never like facilitate any of that? Like, what a place for some like growth, right? So like helping parents like try out different things when you're together. And then addressing parenting issues from a strength-based perspective. This is a soapbox that I will just continue to die on. Being strength-based is incredibly hard. It's a skill. Like we cannot just be like, oh, I have a BSW, an MSW, a degree in human services, a degree in criminal justice. Like I can just be strength-based because like this is the field I work in. Being strength-based, you have to build that skill. It takes a lot to be working with the family, sometimes in their most like chaotic, most crisis times, and to find strengths within that family to be able to pull out and then build upon. If it was I wish it was easier said than done, but it is not. So really thinking about like intentionally when you're with the family, like even if you have to address some hard things, like trying to come at that from a strength-based perspective. Again, we could do a whole day training on how to build those skills within ourselves, right? But definitely always want to try to be strength-based. Our next one, concrete supports. So our original definition, access to supports and services that reduce stress and help to make families stronger. The updated language, identifying, accessing, advocating for, and receiving high quality and equitable support, including the basic necessities everyone deserves and specialized services to address specific needs. So you can see this is quite a lengthy update. But when, if you look at that original definition, it was all about just like, we just got to provide the supports and services that we know reduce stress. So if you had a family who is experiencing domestic violence, like the first go-to is like, oh, I'm gonna refer them to our maybe our local shelter or DV services so they can get involved in some DV treatment. Like that can't be our only step. Like that can't be it. Because that might not work for everybody. Like maybe they're not ready for that. So really thinking about like what concrete support would look like for that family. And we can just ask them. Like never once, and I hate to say this, never once when I was a case manager or a supervisor did I ever before, like in child welfare, I worked at a private agency, so we would get a case, we'd have 45 days to get an IA scheduled, get the IA, and make the service plan. So, like, once the IA was done, we would take that and create a service plan. Never once, not one time in my practice, did I ever, in between getting the IA and making the service plan, did I talk to a parent and say, here's what came back on your IA, like, what services do you think would be helpful? We had those conversations after we developed the service plan, like, once we referred them to services and then talking about like what was working and what was not. But really thinking about like what concrete support to support the updated definition of like basic necessities. Everyone deserves the basic necessities. And if they don't have them, that's where we need to start because that's the only way we're going to be able to build that concrete support. So Offering concrete support, meeting basic needs. Number one, always number one. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's not much we can build on if we don't have our basic needs met. Knowing where to go to get help when needed, access to appropriate services, follow through to address problems, support and services during following a crisis, and collaborative goal setting. So, kind of, my example, like you can clearly see, definitely I needed to be better about building concrete support with the families. Um, I think one of the things that I think about now when we talk about concrete support, I am involved with a few different coalitions who are working on early intervention services and the gaps and the limited access that families have to early intervention services. And like we always keep coming back to the questions of like, we know that there's these long wait lists. We know that we don't have enough providers to meet all the families who are eligible for this service. Like, what is happening to the families in between? And it's not shocking to me anymore because I've sat through so many of these meetings and listened to the stories that are being shared. Sometimes a family never gets services. Like, isn't that wild? Like, your child, A, is in need of developmental services, is eligible for the program that is offered, but because there is such a gap, like in the 3 years of their eligibility, they never get off the wait list. Like, so just saying, like, oh, I'll refer you to early intervention services, like, that's a service, and hopefully they do get in, but that's not a concrete support until they're actually in the program. So, really thinking about, like, not just the typical, like, oh, I'm going to refer you to the support system to address your need, but really thinking about, like, what is important to the family, where they're at in their journey, and what if those like go-to services like aren't providing the support that they need. The next one, social and emotional competence of children. Our original definition, family and child interactions that help children develop the ability to communicate clearly, recognize and regulate their emotions, and establish and maintain relationships. With the updated language, and I highlighted these two words because I think they're just tremendously important. Providing environments and experiences grounded in early relational health that build positive social skills, enable children to regulate thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, and promote effective communication, problem solving, and decision making skills. So again, the updated language like really focuses on not just like the relationship between the parent and the child and the parent being responsible for like all the development, but really thinking about what environments foster that and what experiences can foster that as well. But still focused, right, on those social skills, regulation, things like that. This is one of my favorite updates to the language because I just feel like it like broadens the context of like where children like develop. It's not just always like in between within the home with the parent and the child. We know they're like sponges, right? They soak up everything that's happening around them. So like we can use or we should be like using that when we talk about like how to develop their social and emotional competence. So how can we do that? Quality primary relationships, always promoting nurturing communications, actions, and comforting touch. Building friendship skills for peer relationships, which is why, I love like going into parent groups and usually they have like somebody who takes the kids sometimes, right? And just like watching them all play together. And like they don't know why they're there, right? They're typically like 0 to 3 of the parent groups that I've gone into. So like they don't know like what's happening like outside of that room. Like they don't even have, they're just in a room playing with some fun toys. But like using that time to like really think about like how we can support like their healthy development. Emotional recognition, recognizing and expressing feelings. I think like back in my early days, like I in college, like worked at a childcare facility and like in the like 3, 4 year old rooms, we had like the posters of like, tell me how you're feeling today. And it had like the pictures of the faces, which is great. Like that was like a helpful tool because, could really like figure out like where kids were at that day. But outside of just like identifying it, like being able to express those feelings, because pointing at a picture and just being like, I'm sad, like that's not allowing them time to express their feelings. Like they're telling us how they're feeling. But then typically, especially in those environments, like they're expected to like, well, okay, like you still have to like sit down, follow the rules, follow directions, all the things, but they're telling us they're sad. So like, how are we allowing that expression? Problem solving skills, practicing self control. That's a huge one, especially for like our littlest ones. Again, skills that need to be taught. Like they just aren't magically going to like develop these themselves. Some of those core life skills, how play with other children, self advocacy. Think back and if there was one thing that I can think that changed my parenting style from like how I was parented, the self-advocacy piece, because my daughter is now 17, and like I have no doubt in my mind, like she's about to like graduate high school, like she's a senior. I have no doubt in my mind, like she is going to go to college and like not only is she like has like internal self-confidence, but like she's going to know how to advocate for herself because that is something that I learned through my professional work that is so important when it comes to like that lifespan development, not just thinking of them like, oh, be nice to your friends, follow directions, like make good choices, all those things, but that self-advocacy piece to like really stand up and say like I don't like this. Like I'm not going to participate in this because I don't like it. I think that's such a huge skill that we can develop or support development at a very young age, but like the way you see that like kind of like manifest and come out as they become like adolescents and then adults is huge. And then, of course, like sharing, cooperation, taking turns, all of those things, like promoting all of those things in early childhood, you will definitely see the strengths come out as those children continue to develop. And then we have parent-child relationship. Um, excuse me. We want to enhance relationships that are warm, nurturing, responsive, and related to positive outcomes. This one is not a like specific definition in the original framework, so there's no like current or like previous definition and an updated definition. This is just kind of like an additional protective factor. Equally important, it just doesn't have like the specific language updates. But what do positive parent-child relationships look like? Being in tune with each other. So, when we think of infants, you think of eye contact. So, like that is something, if you work with little ones, like to look out for. Like, are they able to make eye contact? Is there like that serve and return communication, whether it's just like giggles or laughing or coos, or actually like as they become like able to speak, what that looks like. The parent's ability to read verbal and nonverbal cues of the child. Again, another thing that like has to be, it's a skill. Like when you become a parent, you just don't magically get the ability to like pick up on your kids' signals. Some people do, and that's great, but not everybody. Especially if they didn't have a healthy attachment to their primary caregivers when they were children, it's going to be extremely difficult for them now as parents with like no skill building to be able to do that. So, ways that you can look at that, especially if you're like working with the family unit, like pointing out like, oh my gosh, he's making eye contact with you. That is so good. Like maintain that eye contact like that. Like you have no idea what kind of connections you're building in the brain when you guys make eye contact. That is phenomenal. Like that's all you have to do. Like you don't have to like magically find like special glasses or anything to do that, but helping them understand like, oh, the eye contact is good. I'm going to keep doing that. The child's ability to read cues of the parent. So just opposite, right? So maybe it doesn't work with the eye contact thing because that's more of like an infant level. But again, I like can think back to so many parent-child visits where it's like it was clear that the parent was overwhelmed in the visit. Like for whatever the reason might be. And instead of stepping in and saying like, wow, like I think like mom is like, really needing you to pay attention and like listen, just like letting it spiral, like just like why would I do that? Like just why? Because like children also have to learn how to read those cues. And if you're working with the parent to learn how to read the cues, they're definitely not teaching their children how to read the cues. So really thinking about it like from both lenses. Parents having the knowledge, skills, and ability to respond to the needs of the child appropriately and consistently. This one's always not, it's not funny, but like this one I always think about like in context of like my own when I was a supervisor, like with my own team of case managers, like they needed the same thing. I needed to respond appropriately and consistently with them. And then in turn, I would expect them to respond appropriately and consistently with their families, right? We don't very rarely like did I ever have to like confront a worker and say like, wow, this parent called me and said that they've called you like 15 times and you're not responding to them. So it's like everybody needs this. This is not just like specific to like a certain demographic of parents or the bad parents or the parents involved in the systems. Everybody needs to have people that support them that are responding appropriately and consistently. And again, that's a skill. Like not everybody does that, right? That's not like everybody's like go-to method of like interactions. So really building that and helping them understand like why that's important. I feel like I went through that very fast because we still have quite a bit of time, but then we can have more dialogue, so I'm okay with that. You guys will get this slide. Like these are just links to additional resources from PCA Illinois. So we have a ton of stuff that you can use. Our professional brochures, parent slicks, we have posters, all of them for free. You just have to pay shipping if you order them. All of our trainings that we provide are free of cost as well. We can certainly do them for your like programs, but we also have ways to kind of like adapt them. If you do have parent groups that you want to bring this information to, we're happy to do that. The Center for Study of Social Policy, that is one of the initial like authors of the framework. And then the Children's Trust Fund Alliance just has a ton of good resources. So I added them in there as well. So feel free to use any of those resources. Before I stop sharing my screen, I just want to share some upcoming events. So we have two more webinars of our series on February 19th and February 25th. Those, again, are going to be presented by our friends at Raising Illinois to talk about really how to embed parent leadership. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to hear from a parent leader themselves. They're still working out the details on that one. And then on the 25th, learning about how you can advocate for parent leaderships and for parents in your programs. And then we have a few more webinars coming out for the next couple months that, again, save the dates. And if I have registration links, I'll be sure to include them in the follow-up email. This page is just our Parent Leadership Month resources. I'm so excited. We have a web page solely dedicated to parent leadership and how to promote parent leadership and ways to get involved. So that's kind of where all of our stuff will live. So you guys will get this, and there's downloadable links and clickable links, all the good things in this slide that you guys will get. Here is my information. Again, you guys will get this. So I am going to go ahead and stop sharing. We're in webinar format, so I can't like have you guys come off screen. But I would love to hear any questions that you guys have. I see Elaine asked in the Q&A if certificates will be sent out. Yes, I will send a general certificate of attendance that you guys can fill in your name for. You'll get a copy of the slides, the link to the recording, probably some other fun resources that I want to share with you all. Right now, before I go into the chat, I am going to put a link to our survey. It's short. If you have a few minutes, we definitely appreciate your feedback. And now I'm happy to go through the chat. Will this information be sent out by email to everyone? Absolutely. You guys will get the information to register for the upcoming webinars. Any other questions, thoughts, ways that you guys are promoting or strengthening protective factors in the work that you're doing? We'd love to hear any work that you guys are already doing, because that's always nice, to see, but then also to like build on. Just gonna scroll through the chat. Again, thank you, Laura, for sharing some of those thoughts. I see that you guys are raising your hand. I don't know if you're doing that on purpose, but if you do have questions, just throw them in the Q&A. I'm not sure how to. Oh, it does allow people to talk. Oh my gosh, that's new to me. Let's see. Is it possible to get the EI resources and implement in home visits? I will share everything I have. I'm just going to be honest, I'm not an early intervention expert, but I can definitely give you resources and ways to get involved in that work. Okay, so I'm going to, everybody who has their hand raised, I'm going to unmute. I'll start with Cheryl or Sherelle. Oh, you can. Come on. Look at this. Guys, I just learned something new. All right, I'm just going to move on. Tiffany Moore, you have your hand raised, so I'll bring you on if you have any. Sometimes I feel like hand raises are accidental, so no pressure here. Okay. Tiffany, hand raise also.
That was by accident. I'm sorry.
Oh, nope, you're totally fine. I don't want to like miss anybody, so I don't want to like cut anybody off. Lutz, I don't want to mispronounce your name. Okay, nobody coming off mute there. Last one is Greg. I'll give you an opportunity to share. Okay, well, strength based, I learned something new today. So even if nobody had questions, that is okay. Oops. Oh, no worries, Missy. That's okay. Let's see. It looks like Melanie shared. Oh, the Teen Health and Prevention Coalition will be hosting a parent guardian prevention series discussing internet safety, digital safety, and more. Love that. Oh, Ashley shared that she was able to get some resources for her son who was in early intervention through his primary doctor. And Andrea shared that you can self-refer to early intervention by contacting the local Child and Family Connections office. So you guys are like just resource pros here in the chat. So thank you all for sharing that. I am going to put our survey link in one more time. I see a Q&A from Danielle. What support do parents need most during high stress moments to prevent harm before it happens? Oh my gosh, Danielle, what a good question. Um, and this is just based on like my experience kind of being in this field for a long time. So if anybody has any other things they want to share, feel free to throw them in the chat. Um, I'm always going to like go back to like the number one most important thing is just like connection, right? Like we just need to connect with them where they're at. So like even if the stress is self-inflicted or they're stressed because of a choice that they made, like we have to just be like, that is what it is. Like really connect with them that this is a stressful time for them and support them in any way that we can. Sometimes that support is just going to be listening, right? I again, obviously my blurred lines between like professional and personal. I learned at a very early on with my daughter, probably like fifth, sixth grade age. There was going to be a lot of conversations that like I didn't know what she needed and she wouldn't know how to tell me what she needed. So I learned a very effective way for us was when she started on like 100, like I had the worst day ever. You're never going to believe what happened. I would say, Alana, like before you start, like I do want to hear you, but is this going to be a conversation that you need me to listen? Are you going to need advice or are you going to need like help? Because when she was able to frame what was she was about to tell me, it allowed me to like listen with the lens of like how I can best support her. So instead of her telling me, she had a disagreement with one of her friends, um, instead of like I could have come at that as like, well, did you do X, Y, and Z to like offend them? Which would not be helpful. But if she told me like, I just need you to listen, I would know from the very first sentence, like the support she needs is for me to just validate her feelings, just to listen. And being able to like understand that like even in the most stressful times, lots of times there's not going to be very much we can do to like actually resolve the situation. But supporting the people how they want to be supported is the most important. So not that every conversation you're able to like be like, hey, stop telling me like what do you need? But you kind of know based on your relationship with whoever you're supporting, kind of where your support can come in. So my first one is always going to be like meet them where they're at and provide the support. And obviously, if it's like a super high stress and there's like children involved, like I'm always gonna like go back to like, is it a safety versus a risk issue? And like following like, I don't want to be like if it's like a huge safety issue to just like minimize risk. Um, but again, that's gonna kind of like dictate how you provide that support. But great question. Love that. Anybody else? Any thoughts, questions, things that they want to share? Oh, I love this in the chat. It can be difficult to support when a parent is not ready to accept the help. We have to be able to come alongside them and meet them where they are in the moment, not the needs we think they need. Sometimes being too helpful can turn harmful. I, yeah, like that is probably the best way I've ever heard that, like put into words. Again, like even if you've had five parents come before this one parent with the same exact need, doesn't mean the way you supported those five parents is the same way you should support the sixth parent. And especially if you have any, training or like you have any background in trauma, like we know, if we don't meet them where they're at and we just like over support, right? Like, no, like you're great, like you did amazing, this is the best. If they don't internally believe that, like our words are really for nothing. So really being cautious of, turning something that's coming from a good place into something that could be more damaging. Um, Again, another skill, but for another training. Yeah, Andrea said sometimes just being there, right? Like I'll listen to you vent. I'm here. Like, let's go. Like, however much time you need. And then, yeah, you can start hearing them like come up with their own solutions or like talk about like what they need to fix the issue. And then you can just come in and reinforce that. Like, well, I heard you say like you thought like a way to solve this would be X, Y, and Z. Like, let's start there. Like, what do you need to be able to do that? And then again, like that just goes back to that like initial support of like meeting them where they're at, and not projecting like what we think would be best or what would work for us, because that's just not always the case. I love doing this training because like when we open it up for Q&A, like it's so refreshing. Like just to know you guys are already doing this work. So I'm sure everything that we talked about today is not necessarily going to be like nuanced or like the most like mind-blowing new things to do. It's just about being intentional, and sometimes just the refresher itself is great. So it's just always so great to see everybody and the work that they're doing, that again, whether you knew you were building protective factors or not, it's happening. And that's the best way to support families. Looks like Karen put in the chat using the ASQ is a good tool to monitor, um, being aware of stage and age appropriateness. All kids do not develop at the same time is labeling absolutely like that. Again, thinking back to my child welfare days, like just because even if they weren't a sibling group, like just because sibling A was potty trained by the time they were two, doesn't mean sibling B will be. So I think, yeah, just empowering parents to understand like kids develop on their own timeline. There are some things that are not that big of a deal if a kid develops early or late. But there's definitely some things to look for to like support the child if they are falling behind developmentally, which is why tools like the ASQ are so helpful. So thank you, Karen, for putting that in the chat. Anybody else? I know we still have a few minutes left, but I don't want to keep everyone on just to stare at silence. But this has been such a great conversation. I hope you guys have found this helpful. Um, and hopefully the resources that we share after will be beneficial as well. And we're recording, so you can always come back and watch the recording. So I'll give it one final call. I will keep the webinar open for another couple minutes. Um, if anybody has any final questions, thoughts that they want to share, if not, feel free to jump off and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I hope you all can join us for our series next week and then the last week. And then you'll probably be seeing us a lot for Cat Months as we start planning that, or we've already started. But thank you all for joining us. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and hopefully we see you next week.